We did like the big view of the Easter and the resurrection and the 40 days on earth, the ascension. We just briefly mentioned all those things. We didn't go into huge detail. Um, and and so I did that of a purpose, because today I want to, we're going to step away from John a while, because we got John like up to the Easter time, and now I want to go and I want to talk about Matthew 24 and 25 specifically, although these things are also mentioned in Mark and Luke, but we will focus on Matthew. And so we have studied Daniel, right? Last year we did the whole book of Daniel. We did a lot of Bible prophecy, and sometimes I mention to you the Olivet Discourse, but I want to go through it carefully, verse by verse. The end times according to Jesus. Of course, God wrote the whole Bible, so even though Daniel's book is also God's book, but this is Jesus' exact words, okay? And these passages here, remember that I told you the synoptic gospels, if you remember when I told you that word, and it meant the gospels that looked alike, or in other words, the gospels that saw things similar. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all three have this, but Matthew has it more. He has 2 whole chapters devoted to it, okay? So he puts it in much more detail. So we're gonna use Matthew, but every once in a while we may hop over to Mark or Luke if they have a verse or two that Matthew didn't have. Okay? So today is kind of like an introduction to get you used to get everything settled. And I wish more people were here today, because then they're going to come next week and they're going to miss all this. But anyway, I can't help it. So the first thing we have to realize is, when did Jesus do this? When did he give the Olivet Discourse? When is he doing all this? Okay, he's doing this just a few days before the crucifixion. And remember, we had come up to this time in John. We had the triumphal entry and all that in the Gospel of John. So it's the same time that we were up to in John. But John does not record any of this. Okay? So this would probably be maybe 2 days before the crucifixion, maybe 3 days after the triumphal entry, something like that, is when this happens. And right before this, Matthew 24, just so you know, the verses immediately preceding it in Matthew 23, what Jesus says here kind of sets the stage, so we know why he's saying what he's saying in Matthew 24. So first of all, we have to read these verses. He says, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate, for I shall say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth till you shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. So this is Jesus' pronunciation upon the nation. Remember, we talked about how the nation rejected Jesus, but the individual people did not. All of them did not, obviously. There were thousands of people that got saved, but as a whole, the nation, their verdict was they rejected him. So that's why he's using here Jerusalem, because what is Jerusalem? It's the capital, right? It's the capital of the nation. So in this instance, he's using that to refer to Israel nationally. It's like, when we watch the news, and if you do watch the news, by the way, stop. So, okay, so because it's all very leftist and horrible. But if you do watch it, they'll come on and they'll say, in Washington today, blah, blah, blah happened. Okay, so that is telling us this is of national interest, right? Because it's from Washington. So this is the same thing. Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Jerusalem, right? It's the capital of Israel. By the way, President Trump did not make it the capital. He recognized it. It's always been the capital, even back 2,000 years ago. So, and why did Jesus say this? Why was he so harsh? Because if you read chapter 23, he had pronounced many woes upon the scribes and the Pharisees over and over. Woe unto you, because they were rejecting him and they were leading the nation astray. So now he says this, and then the last verse down there, he says, you're not going to see me again until you say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. And that's what they're going to say at the end of the tribulation when he returns. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for chapter 24. So after he said that, it says he went out, okay? And he departed from the temple. So all of chapter 23, he's actually in the temple talking. And now he leaves. And his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. So this is a artist's rendition of what the temple probably looked like. This is the second temple, also known as Herod's temple. Is that a little bit out of focus? There. So this was the temple during Jesus' time, okay? Herod took the little one that Zerubbabel built and he made it a whole lot bigger. And he made it look like something like this. Obviously, we don't have any pictures of it, but a man named Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, did write very detailed descriptions, and they make this and other pictures that we have are based on what Josephus wrote, and he was a very detailed person. So that's how they get this. So when Jesus walks out of the temple, the disciples are walking around, and they're like, look at this beautiful, glorious thing. So they're wanting him to brag on it, Look how beautiful it is. By the way, it took Herod 40 years to get it to looking like this. 40 years. And what did Jesus say? He was always very good at popping people's bubbles, right? He went around with a pen and popped bubbles. He said unto them, see ye not all these things? All this you're showing me? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So they're wanting him to brag on it, and he says, there won't be one stone left upon another. And just to show you how literally that was fulfilled, one day when I take y'all on the J.P. Powell Super Duper Tour of Israel, okay, we were going here to the southern wall of the Temple Mount. You see all these stones? Just kind of laying there, like a giant kind of threw them down. That is the remains of the temple, laying here in a big pile. There was others around, but these are still here. Could you imagine 2,000 years after something is destroyed and the mess is still there? So now the Temple Mount, this is the retaining wall, okay? That's not the temple. This is a wall that Herod built around the whole complex. I think this is like 50 acres. It's bigger than you think it is. But he built all of that, and then he filled it in with dirt. He did amazing things. How did he do all that? Slaves did all that for him. Now, so they show him the temple. He makes this pronouncement, and now he leaves the area of the temple, and he's going to go where? He says, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives. So now he's over on the Mount of Olives, and the disciples come unto him privately, and they're going to ask him a question. But first of all, I have to make sure and show you all again where the Mount of Olives is. And I've showed you this many times, but there's always different people here, so I always have to have the maps here in case you missed it. And this picture here was painted in 1892 by Enrique Simonet, I guess. Anyway, it's a picture of Jesus here weeping over Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives. It's a very famous picture. And this is an artist's rendition. Is it if you're standing there looking straight at the temple? Okay, these are all artist renditions because that's not how it looks right now, obviously. And this is a real picture. This is where you always come to have your picture made. Okay, so when we go on the tour, y'all can all stand it right here. Okay, and you have your picture made looking over. Of course, there's not a temple there now. There's the mosque, and there's the eastern gate. And down here, the southern wall, there's that big pile of stones I just showed you. Still there. This is the south, east, north, and western walls over there. So this is the Mount of Olives looking over. Of course, when Jesus was there, the temple would have been there. And then this is looking back at the Mount of Olives. You can see how big of a mountain it is. This is from the mosque looking over there. This is the place where you stand and have your picture taken. And you see this is looking west. So the Dead Sea is going to be down here and Jordan's over there. So that's looking due west. Oh, it's not even 1 mile. Yeah, they probably took this with a drone. Yeah. Yeah, this is, I mean, they were up in the air. They were not standing on the ground when they took that. Because it's a high view. And this is the map I showed you other day. And the Mount of Olives is here. And he's looking here. Okay? And now, here's what they said. So he's sitting on the Mount of Olives, and they came and they said 2 questions. Tell us, when shall these things be? Number 1, when? And number 2, what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? They wanted to know. Okay? So first of all, when? The end of the world. You see it said there, the end of the world. Now we have to really break this down because it doesn't really mean the end of the world. If we look at and I copied this out of my Bible software, and I don't think you can read it, and there was no way for me to make it any bigger because I didn't type it in. I just took it as a screenshot, and I couldn't make it bigger. So, so anyway, is this world aeon? This is a Greek word, okay, and it means age or eternity. So I would say the end of the age. So they were not asking about the end of the world as we know it, and they were not asking about the destruction of the planet, the earth, but they were asking about the end of the age or the dispensation that they were currently in, and when was the kingdom going to start? Okay? They knew that the age that they were in was not the age of the kingdom because Jesus is not the king. So they were wondering, when is this time here where we're under the Romans going to end? And when is the time when you're going to be the king going to start? That's what they're wanting to know. And what's the sign for that? How are we going to know? Okay. They had no idea all that it was. They thought, is it 1 week, 2 weeks? How long do we have to wait? They had no idea how long it was going to be. So I'm calling Matthew 24 the Great Convergence. Matthew 24 and 25, because these signs that Jesus is giving, when they begin happening, is like it's converging on the second coming. Okay, so it's like if you're going down the road and you see a road sign, like if you're on a big trip and you see a road sign that says, I don't know, something 10 miles away, and then in 5 miles you see another one, 5 miles, then 4 miles, then the signs get faster and faster as you get closer to it. This is kind of the same idea. Okay? So now, in order for you to really understand it, we have to go back to Daniel 9, which we did almost 2 years ago, 18 months ago. But some of you weren't here, I'm sure. And we have to look there because Daniel 9 and Matthew 24 and 25 are joined together inseparably. You can't really pull them apart, okay? They're together. So these slides are from then. And remember that Daniel was praying. He was praying this magnificent prayer that's in Daniel 9. And he was speaking and praying and confessing his sin. And he said, "The sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord." And verse 21, while I was speaking in prayer, even Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And remember, we said that was about 3 p.m. The evening offering is about 3 p.m. And now Gabriel is there with Daniel. And Gabriel's the one that's always giving messages, right? He's the messenger angel. Michael is the warrior angel. He's always at war with somebody. And he's the one that protects Israel. And Gabriel's the one always coming down and giving people a message. So he informed me and talked with me and said, "Oh, Daniel, I'm now come to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplication," in other words, his prayer, "the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." So he's going to explain it to him. And so I call this the heptads of history. A heptad is 7, okay? 7. Remember that, 7. So Jeremiah had wrote that at the end of 70 years, the Babylonian captivity was going to be over. And Daniel knew that. And so he's praying, and he's doing all this praying because he knows 70 years are up. And Israel is going to be released, and they're going to be able to go back. And he thinks they're going to go back, and everything's going to go back the way it was before the captivity. Okay, and Gabriel has come to tell him, as I always say, good news and bad news. Good news, Daniel, is that everything that you're praying about here is going to happen. The bad news is not going to happen right now at the end of the 70-year Babylonian captivity, but it's going to happen at the end of 70 weeks of years, 490 years. Daniel's going to happen far in the future. And these are the things he was praying for: finish the transgression, end of sin, reconciliation of iniquity, everlasting righteousness, and anoint the most holy. All that is millennial stuff, right? It still hasn't happened. So the 70 weeks were for thy people, that's Israel, and thy holy city, that's Jerusalem. And remember, we talked about how this was 77s, which was 490 years, the heptads. Daniel's 70 weeks. So Jeremiah said Babylon captivity would end in 70 years, but Gabriel said that it would be 77s of years, 490 years, before everything that Daniel's praying about is going to happen. And that is what Daniel did not know. He thought all this was going to happen now. And Gabriel said, no. This is coming. It's going to be in the millennial kingdom. And this is what the disciples are thinking when they're asking Jesus this question, okay? They're wanting to know, okay, all this stuff Daniel prayed about and Gabriel said was going to happen, when's it going to happen? This is how they're thinking, okay? All of these verses are focused on Israel. Daniel's prophecy has nothing to do with the church. He didn't even see the church. He knew nothing about it. Nor did anybody in the Old Testament ever know anything about the church, nor did the disciples. Remember, it all went right over their head until after Pentecost. The disciples are thinking the same things. They really don't understand the church at this point. When they're asking Jesus this question, they are not thinking church, okay? They don't know what that means. Just remember, we know what it means. They don't know what that means. So what are they thinking? And how is Jesus going to answer them? And I put this picture in there. It was in there before, of how the Old Testament, they could see the mountain peaks of prophecy. And here, and Clarence Larkin drew this map. He was very famous for drawing maps. And he put here in the valley the church, so they didn't see that. Okay. So I call this Daniel's prophecy clock, because Gabriel gave him the time when certain things happen, the prophecy will start. And here's the things. Verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, given by Cyrus, until Messiah the Prince, until the Messiah comes, shall be 7 weeks, heptads, and 62 weeks. 7 plus 62 is 69 heptads, which is 483 years. Daniel, from the time that Cyrus gives the decree to go back until Messiah, is going to be 483 years. And that is exactly when it happened. So Cyrus gives this decree telling the Jews they could go back, and this started what I call Daniel's prophecy clock. It starts ticking. Okay. The first 7 heptads corresponded, most people think, to the end of in other words, the finishing of the Old Testament. When it's finished writing. By the way, I said this at the beginning of class, but some of y'all weren't here. So I have another new pamphlet, and I just came yesterday. I was so happy to get them. A primer on the Tanakh. So this is the layout of the Old Testament, the Hebrew way. Oh, this is not written in Hebrew, okay? Y'all can read it. But anyway, y'all can all have one if you want one. And that's my 3rd pamphlet for this year. And I've already got 2 more cooking in the oven. So Nehemiah returned and he rebuilt the wall, remember, that the Babylonians had destroyed. Zerubbabel built the temple that Herod later renovated. It was a small temple. And then Gabriel tells Daniel, after 62 weeks, heptads, 7 times all this, Messiah will be cut off, he'll be killed, but not for himself, for others, right? Jesus died for others, not for himself. So he's basically pinpointing for us in history when these events are going to occur. And now the second part of that verse. And the people of the prince that shall come, that's the Romans, what will they do? They'll destroy the city, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary, the temple, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. So Gabriel's telling Daniel the Romans are coming, and they're going to destroy Jerusalem again and the temple. I'm sure Daniel was probably scratching his head, because when Daniel's getting this prophecy, the temple had not been rebuilt, right? So he's like, okay, they're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be destroyed again. I mean, just think of Daniel thinking through all this. You know, he's human just like us. So that second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and that's what Jesus said. All this is going to be gone. Remember, Jesus is saying all this about 32 or 33. We don't really know, because Jesus wasn't born in the year 0, okay? He was really born in the year 4 BC, because they kind of got that off in the numbering. So it was approximately 40 years from the time of the crucifixion to the time of the destruction of the temple. It was about 40 years. It was like God giving them 40 years. Often that's a sign of judgment. And now Gabriel goes on. He says, and he, the prince or the ruler, which we know is the Antichrist, is coming, the coming one. He's telling Daniel he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That's 7 years. 1 week, 7 times 7 years. And in the middle of that week, he will cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. So the third temple has to be built before the Antichrist will fulfill those verses. Okay, and we did talk about that before. And then in Matthew, we will do all these verses in order, but I'm just pointing things out to you today. Jesus did point to this verse in Daniel when he said, here, the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet. So he's pointing to this. Basically, here he's pointing us. He's like, go back and read Matthew. That's why I brought you back today. It's like, go back and read Daniel chapter 9, and you'll understand Matthew chapter 24 better. And so that's why I brought you here today, before we dove into it. And Mark also spoke of, both of these spoke of what Daniel talked about. Okay? So now I drew this little picture because I really like pictures. And I said, well, this will help them to understand. So the ticking clock. Over here, the clock started ticking when Cyrus issued the decree. 49 years passed, and the Tanakh, the Old Testament was finished. 483 years passed, and the Messiah was rejected by national Israel and died on the cross. And also, the clock stopped ticking. Okay? Now, from here to the millennium, this is what they're asking about. The end of the age and the start of the kingdom. This is what they're wanting to know when they're asking him on the Mount of Olives. When is this going to happen? Right here. And he's telling them in a roundabout way. It's going to be 490 prophecy years from here to here. Okay? But the thing about it is, from here to here was 483 years, but when the Messiah was rejected, God stopped the clock. And there were 7 years left on the prophecy clock. And now we have a big pause called the church age of indeterminate length. We don't know how. It's already lasted 2,026 years, right? How long is it going to last? We don't know. It's lasted longer than any of these years, almost by 4 times. But when it stops, okay, and when will it stop? It's going to stop at the rapture of the church. The church age will stop here. And when it stops, the tribulation will begin, and that clock that had 7 years left is going to start back ticking. The tribulation, we know, is exactly 7 years long. And at the end of the tribulation is the end of the age they were asking about, and the start of the millennium, and Jesus the Messiah becoming the king. So the church age is a parenthesis in time, and that's where we're living. And the prophets or the disciples, they don't see it. How do we know? God gave it to Paul, everything about the church. We have to read Paul's epistles to know those things. The Olivet Discourse is not about the church age. It's about this time and this time. So if you try to make the Olivet Discourse about the church age, you're going to get all mixed up, okay? Your end time ideas will be way off. The Olivet Discourse is not about the rapture, not about any of that. So if you try to read that into there, it's going to be way off. And if your view of the end times is off, your view of all other things gets off. And we have all experienced that recently. So I don't want y'all to be off. I want y'all to know these things so that you can be grounded in the Word. Pastor Mark was just telling us about someone very near and dear to all of us that is going to a different church now. Not even a church, I wouldn't call it a cult. The Mormons. Uh, the Mormons are not a church, okay? They called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but they're not part of the church age. They're not part of Jesus' church, okay? They call themselves that, but they're a big cult. So I don't want y'all going off into anything wrong, because I'm very burdened that we know all this so that we can stay on track and on target with these things. And if any of you want this in a picture, I can print it out and give it to you. You may want to keep it. So the great convergence, this is what we're going to be talking about in Matthew 24 and 25, the end time signs coming about, okay? And what should we do? We will see in Matthew 25, Jesus tells us many things that people should do. Most of it has to do with watching, waiting, and being prepared. So I'm just putting a few little summaries in here. Bible prophecy is proof for divine inspiration of the Scripture. I mean, how does God? How do the prophets know what's going to happen hundreds of years in the future? Because God knows everything, right? God gives prophecy so that we can be prepared and we can warn other people, and that we don't get taken astray. That's the main thing. Be prepared, warn others, and don't get off track. Israel and the Jewish people are at the center of all Bible prophecy, and God has a plan for them, just like He has a plan for the church, and He has a plan for them. And we must stand with them, pray for them, and give them the gospel, just like we give everybody the gospel. So that's like the introduction. Now next week we will start like diving in. We'll go through Matthew 24. We'll go through all the verses. Remember, this is Jesus Himself speaking. Do y'all have any questions? We have like 3 minutes. Yes.
So like we're kind of like Daniel in the way Daniel was waiting on the second temple, or thinking of the third temple there and but when you've been witnessing the Jewish people and trying to, reach them that Jesus is the Messiah, have you ever used that part in Daniel, the 483 years, and then here's Messiah? I mean, using those why did Jesus come at that exact moment?
I've never had the chance to get that far with any Jewish person, because they would have to be really willing to listen to you. And sadly, the Jewish people that I knew in Charleston were Reformed Jews, and they don't even believe in the Messiah. So, but I have taught it to many people, and other people have used it. So it is there, and it is something you can, but the person has to be open. They have to be open to it. By the way, we won't see the third temple